Hello and welcome to the Snickerdoodle Knits YouTube channel. I am Jessica, the knitter and designer behind Snickerdoodle Knits, and in this video I am going to talk about my on-the-farm fingerless mitts knitting pattern design. So this is a brand new pattern that I've just released with my Forever Home knitting pattern collection, a collection of 5 DK weight patterns that were inspired by my home state, Montana. So the collection includes patterns that reference, of course, the farm, and there's the plains of Montana, there's the mountains, there's the cold winters, and then there's kind of like cabin life. So of course this one's about the farm, and the design inspiration behind this was just thinking about the aesthetic of standing in the end of a row of crops in a field. So when you're standing there looking at it, you can see defined rows of, like, you can see the crop growing and you can see the dirt between the crop, right? But as the crop grows, it gets taller and bushier and it's filling out. When you look down the row, you can still see those defined rows really close to you, but as you look off into the distance, they kind of meddle together so that you start to see more green and less of the dirt. And then eventually it kind of just fades away, so it's just like a whole sea of green crop is what you see. So that's exactly what this was inspired by. Here we have close to us, we have the very well defined rows of the dirt and the crops, but as you go off looking into the distance, so it's like you're standing here, here's the crops, and you're looking that way. As you go off into the distance, it starts to fade away, so the rows aren't nearly as well defined, and then eventually, of course, it just fades into this sea of the crops. So it's a fun, simple pattern. It's stranded colorwork, so it's just 1 by 1 stranded colorwork for most of it, which makes a really fun, meditative kind of knit. It's really relaxing, not whole lot of concentration required. Of course, for the thumbs you do have increases, but yes, it's a fun, simplistic knit, especially if you're not wanting something that requires a whole lot of brain power, a whole lot of concentration. And it also makes it, of course, easier to set it down and then come back and pick it up later. So if you feel confident with knitting in the round or working in the round in general, I think this is definitely a project that you can feel comfortable working, even if colorwork is new to you. So the colorwork is stranded colorwork, which means that you carry both yarns throughout the whole circumference, but you only knit one of those yarns at a time. So like each stitch is only one color, but you alternate between colors for what you're working. So the inside of the mitt looks something like this for your color work. And then I think that was this one I actually did a better job of picking up my floats. So here you actually don't want really long stretches of carrying your floats here, just behind the fabric. So you want to catch your floats, which is here. It just helps break it up so that you don't have quite as long of stretches of yarn. So in the pattern, I actually include in a linked video tutorial that talks about how to catch your floats. So yes, the techniques are knitting and purling, primarily knitting, with the colorwork, of course, and then increases for the thumb, and then of course picking up stitches for the thumb, which I also include a video tutorial on how to pick up stitches for a thumb specifically. And then it's finished off with a sewn bind off, and the best way I can describe it is sort of similar to a Kitchener stitch, except for you're only doing one layer of fabric. You're not binding 2 layers of fabric together. So that does use just your yarn and your darning needle, and I have a video tutorial on that as well linked. So if those techniques sound unfamiliar, if you've never done it before, don't let that stop you. It's a great pattern to learn those techniques, to learn color work, and to learn how to work a thumb and how to work a sewn bind off. So the yarn that I used, I think I mentioned that the whole collection of my Forever Home knitting patterns is knit in DK weight. So of course this is DK weight. The yarn that I used is from Western Sky Knits, who is a indie yarn dyer located in Montana. And this yarn is her Merino 17 DK base, and the colors that I used are Sage and Dune. So of course I picked out my colors based on the symbolism. I wanted it to look kind of like the dirt in the field, and then the green crops as they're growing before they've completely matured. So those are my colors, of course. If you look at the projects on Ravelry, my test knitters, they use so many different varieties of colors, and I just love them. So really, when you're picking out your colors, the main thing is just that you want to have a high contrast in your colors, so that color work will really show up. But you can use a speckle, you can use a variegated, you can use a solid. I would not recommend using 2 speckled yarns. I think that might just get a bit busy and overwhelming, but you can definitely use 1 speckled and 1 tonal, or 1 speckle and 1 solid, or 2 tonals, 2 solids, whatever. Anyway, you get the idea. I also include for each of my patterns, I have a blog post that gives color recommendations and alternative yarn suggestions. So if you know you want to knit the pattern, but you're like, I have no idea what colors to use, I have no idea what yarn to use, don't worry, I got you covered. So the blog post, the first half of the blog post is color suggestions. So I've selected 2 color combinations that I think would look really great for the pattern. Those colors are all from Western Sky Knits. The second half of the blog post, I give alternative yarn suggestions or recommendations. So if indie dyed yarn is out of your budget, no shame there. Those suggestions give you more affordable price points for yarns that would also work well for the pattern. And then of course you can use those color palette suggestions from above and apply those to your to the other yarns if you're looking for color suggestions as well. And in the blog post that gives alternative yarn recommendations, I've kind of given an outline of, for each yarn, the yardage per 100 grams and the price per 100 grams. So you can kind of compare the yarns in there compared to the yarn that I used and decide what really works best for you and your budget, and also for the pattern. So that is there for you as a resource. To get there to that blog post, you need to click the link that I have in the description. That link leads you to the pattern page on my website. But then on that pattern page, I have linked in the yarn section, I have linked that blog post so you can find the color suggestions and yarn recommendations. So for sizing, I have included multiple sizes, adult sizes for the pattern, but it's also super easy to customize in length. I actually worked mine a little bit longer because I like to have the longer mitt than some people, and I include that. I include a blurb about that in the pattern so you know what I did. But it's really easy to just extend your length, and of course you can extend these rows as well if you'd like, proportionally. So, and of course the thumb you can extend as well. So you just add extra rows there, and I include instructions on that in the pattern. So we talked about yarn, we talked about techniques, we talked about it being a fun, simple knit. it's, yeah, I find color work, especially really simple color work, a lot of fun to just kind of just sit and knit and not really have to think about a whole lot, but you're still kind of doing something different. It's not just plain stockinette. So I think that is everything. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments down below. If you liked the video, if you answered your questions, if you found it informative, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up and hit subscribe, and you will so that you can view more of my knitting content like this. I have design videos talking about my designs just like this video, and I also have knitting video tutorials with techniques for my knitting patterns primarily. So I hope to see you around, and happy knitting!